Hey, what's up, y'all? It's your boy Preston here, and this is my thoughts on, this fight hasn't been full, isn't like official yet, and stuff like that. It isn't official yet, but but at the same time though, and stuff like that, it's in the works, and honestly, I feel like it's definitely like more like about to be official, and shit like that more than actually then it's in the works because it's gonna happen, and shit like that. I don't know where Brian Norman where he well I know he's a champion. He doesn't place nowhere. He's a champion. So and they're both champions, and stuff like that, and that's the thing and stuff like that, and hold up, let me do something real quick. All right, I'm back. I had to, readjust something and shit like that, because my phone keeps turning off, so I had to turn my screen time out to 10 minutes instead of 30 seconds. So it should be good now, and shit like that, But basically, especially for this type of fight, this is a big fight, And overall, like, I don't know. I wonder where it's gonna be on. Is it gonna be on top rank? Or is it gonna be on Turkey Alasheikh's Riyadh, and stuff like that? Because it's gonna be one of those two, and shit like that, But if I'm I don't know though, and stuff like that. If I'm guessing, and shit like that. I mean, both can really be able to make up the fight, but you know, but at the same time though, what's gonna be able to give them more money is Riyadh, and shit like that, So I'm guessing that the fight's gonna most likely be on Riyadh, and shit like that, and that's the thing, and shit like that, But this is definitely gonna be a really good fight, I'm definitely looking forward for this, But it's just more of like at the same time though, and stuff. It's just more of like I did like a lot of people with Devin Haney, which I do agree. He is a boring, like, I'm just going to go with this. He is a very boring fighter, and shit like that, Like, he is a very, very boring fighter, and stuff, But it's just more of like, you know, it's just he still gets it done. He still manages to outbox people and still get the work done, and shit like that. But he's very, very boring, and shit like that. Like, that's the thing. Like, he manages to get it done. He has quick hands. He manages to, to move around the ring, quick and stuff like that, But he's very inactive with his punches, and it's very annoying. And, and he can't really do anything about it because his chin is weak. He doesn't really have very good of a chin, Devin Haney. He doesn't really have a very good of a chin. I mean, like, at the same time, though, it's like, I mean, he still took how many punches from Ryan Garcia, so, I mean, like, but, I mean, it could have been a matter of time until he really could have got knocked out like that, and stuff like that, so, I mean, he proves that, I mean, his chin isn't really the best, and stuff like that, but it just, his low of output, everything, man. He's not very, he's a very boring fighter. But at the same time, I do, I am one of the people that, like, at the end of the day, he is a good fighter, and shit like that at the end of the day. It's like, there still is levels, there still is levels in both ways when it comes down to Devin, when it comes down to, to fighters being better than him, and will be able to beat him, or just fighters that don't have the ability to beat him, and shit like that, But the one thing about Devin Haney is that, like, when he sizes up against opponents who, have a lot of power, and stuff like that, which Brian Norman, he has a lot of power, and shit like that, Like, if he's facing, people with a lot of power, and shit like that, or what I was thinking is when he's fighting people that sizes him up, he struggles a lot. Like, the one fight that he got sized up against was Ryan Garcia. And I'm not counting the Jose Ramirez fight. Because Jose Ramirez, like, you cannot say that, like back in the day, Jose Ramirez, yes, like, like to Devin Haney now, would have been in the same level, and shit like that. But, you know, but at the same time, though, he fought an old Jose Ramirez, like a ran down Jose Ramirez. Like that is not anybody that's like a Ryan Garcia or even like a Rolando Romero. And shit like that. Because Rolly right now, in my opinion, would beat Jose Ramirez. He would outbox Ramirez. Because of his power, and he doesn't waste any time to let go of his punches, and and he just looks better. And shit like that. Rolly. I'm not no Rolly fan. None of that shit. And shit like that. But I will say that in my personal opinion, I would pick Rolly over Jose Ramirez. But we'll see though. Like it could be different, but right now I'm picking Rolly. But I'm just saying though and stuff like that, Like that was basically a nobody compared to Devin Haney. And shit like that, So it's like that's what I'm saying, man, and shit, So it's like, yeah, man. And that's the thing, and stuff like that, and yeah, man, and stuff like that, It's like realistically, it's like Brian Norman. I love seeing Brian Norman fight, like and shit like that. Like he has power, speed, boxing skill. Like he's more of in my opinion of a complete boxer than somebody like Devin Haney. Like Devin Haney, it's like like. He's a fighter like this. It's like once he loses, he's going to get better, but then he'll still lose. Because the one thing is that, he, like once somebody can be able to, no matter what, like go through his punches, like Ryan Garcia did, like, it just, how can he be able to win? And shit like that, and, and that's the thing, and that's the thing, with Devin Haney. It's like, if he's fighting somebody that that can just do what they want to do, like just expose, just run through his punches, excuse me, and throw their own combos against him, and then be able to just punch at a high level, basically, and stuff like that, box at a high level, and stuff like that. It's like how that, like, it's just like, what can Devin Haney do? And stuff like that. Because Devin Haney, like, proves time and time and time again that once somebody actually throws punches against him, and stuff like that, that's when he actually, like, struggles, and shit like that, And honestly, like, a lot in both those fights, and I'm just going to say against Lomachenko and Ryan Garcia. Loma, he lost against Loma. Everybody knows he lost against Loma, and stuff like that, Loma, like, was actually throwing punches, and he had no problem to getting in the inside. He outboxed Devin in that fight. I mean, I wouldn't say outboxed, but he didn't make it a good fight, because Devin knows how to box too, obviously. I mean, that's the only way of, like, how he can really fight, and stuff like that, But, Loma won that fight, and stuff like that, And then basically in the Ryan fight, I know Ryan was on Osterine in that fight, but come on, man. It's like, doesn't mean Ryan was on Osterine, doesn't mean that Devin Haney, could have not won that fight at all. Like, literally, like, that didn't really change anything when it came down to it. Honestly, like, Devin still could have, did something else, like what I said, been way more active with his hands, and shit like that, just do what you got to do, he could have won that fight, like, literally, like, look at all these legendary fighters back in the day who got dropped, but then came back, and shit like that, and, who is the, like, hold on, like I'm trying to think and shit like that, like, was it Antonio Tarver? I wasn't around, like, I'm 18 years old, and shit like that, but like, was it Antonio Tarver or somebody, it was one of those kind of boxers, I think it was when was it Tarver Who fought Kelly Pavlik? Let me see. Well, it was Jermaine Taylor. Jermaine Taylor was the one that fought Kelly Pavlik. But Kelly Pavlik is the one that I'm talking about. Like Kelly Pavlik, like he literally came back after after like being dropped, I believe, being knocked to the ground, and he literally came back and stopped Tarver. Not saying that Devin has the power. I mean, not Tarver. I don't know why I keep saying Antonio Tarver, and stuff like that, But I'm not saying he has nearly the power like Jermaine Taylor, but he still could have dropped Ryan, and stuff like that. B, he could have still thrown good combinations and boxed and did beautiful boxing, to be able to get, to be able to win. It's like overall and shit like that, it's like Devin should have beat Ryan, and shit like that, but it's just like, that's in my opinion. He should have beat Ryan Garcia, and shit like that stylistically. He's the better boxer, he's cool. They're both quick, but he's the better boxer. And when it comes down to anything, Devin's more of the smarter fighter, and stuff like that, But, evidently, he's more of a scary fighter and more of likes to fight scary, and shit like that, than actually wanting to, fight. And it just, and if Devin, like, I don't even think he's gonna watch this video, but I'm just saying, if you see this video, bro, if you're fighting, please put on a big statement against somebody like Brian Norman. Like literally, like actually, like throw your hands, like look like a boxer that's hungry, that's not just trying to just like, just like trying to just like run every single time, bro. Like literally, like all you're doing is running and running, bro. Actually throw your hands. Literally. Like I'm just saying, like, that's the point of boxing. At the end of the day, you gotta throw your hands. You can only do damage when you're actually wanting to actually throw hands and handle and wanting to take a hit, and stuff like that, And that's the thing. It's like Devin picks shitty moments for him to be able to let his hands go, and shit like that, because that's the thing. Like, unless if he's moving around using the jab, he doesn't really pick his shots very well. It's like he could have like did something like literally went into a clinch against Ryan Garcia, to then putting the bulbing up and shit like that, like he could have done so many things against somebody, like bulbing up in the inside and then throwing combinations and then being able to get in the, because no matter what, Ryan don't got footwork like you. Ryan, honestly, like the one thing with Ryan Garcia is that, is his footwork. He doesn't really have like the greatest footwork. Like he does, like at the same time, like when it comes down to elite level, but I mean, he still can be able to do what he needs to do to get the job done. But that's what I always seen with Ryan, is that he never really had like the most elite footwork. Like Devin actually has elite footwork, like he can get himself out of danger anywhere, and shit like that with that footwork, and stuff like that, and he could have done anything with that footwork against Ryan, and he just chose to fight scared. Like, and in this fight against somebody like, Brian Norman, what the fuck can you do and shit like that against somebody like Brian Norman, who I know he isn't as big as Ryan, but I mean, at the same time though, I really don't think it's gonna really matter too much, like and stuff like that. I like both these fighters, in my opinion, are on the same level. I know Devin has fought more better opposition, so overall, like he's more seasoned in when it comes down to fighting better opposition. But stylistically, when it comes down to how they fight, like they're both the same, and shit like that, and that's the thing, and stuff. So it's like, Brian Norman isn't gonna be any like this, like Brian Norman, this isn't gonna be anything that's gonna really matter about size when it comes down to Brian Norman, and stuff like that, And that's the thing, like, it's not going to really matter, and stuff like that, because, I mean, Brian Norman proved that, I mean, he could still, like, properly do what he needs to do against taller fighters. And he proved in a fashion where, like, what can you say about his skill set, and stuff like that. I know but the one thing about Brian Norman is his chin. But the thing is, I never seen him obviously get dropped to like somebody like Devin Haney. But I mean, Devin Haney has fought in more competitive fighters than Brian Norman, and stuff like that. So I will say that to save Devin Haney, and shit like that. But at the same time, though, it's like, you know, but that's the thing. It's just, we'll see, man. Brian Norman, like, he can definitely drop Brian Norman, and stuff like that. And if he does drop Brian Norman will, like I do see Devin Haney taking advantage after that, and stuff like that. Like, once he gets like that, like, respected one time, that's where he's gonna take it from there, and stuff like that. But if there's no respect, man, and stuff like that, which, I mean, overall, I mean, Devin, he has at the thing is with Devin is that, like, when he has a natural manpower, but it's just more of like, it, like, it's nothing crazy, and shit like that. That's what I think with Devin, and that's what, like, so I mean, of course, when a man punches you in the face, or let's say that a boxer punches you in the face, it ain't gonna feel well, and shit like that. Especially when they're in an elite level, it isn't gonna feel well, and stuff like that. So I mean, I'm not saying Devin will has anything of power at all. I mean, like, he hasn't knocked anybody out since he knocked out Antonio Moran, like, literally, and I was in, like, bro, and I'm just saying, bro, and I was and I remember I was on a vacation, and shit like that during the time, like, I was in Ocean Shores at the time and shit like that, but. That's the thing and shit like that, like, I remember that time and shit like that, like, it wasn't really vacation, but it was, like, more like working and shit like that, but, but basically, like, I was over there at the time, and I was at, like, a, like, I'm not gonna say where the fuck I'm at, and shit, but basically, that's when that fight happened, and I remember that fight when he knocked out Antonio Moran. I cannot believe he did that, and shit like that, like, literally. And the one thing that's crazy, it's like, that was a pure luck knockout. Like, and it's just like, and honestly, even during that time, I thought that knockout was just really lucky. Like, literally, like, plus Antonio Moran, like, anybody can knock out Moran. Like, literally, like, as long as you set up your punches right, which Devin did, you can knock him out. But I mean, but it's just, it's really crazy to look on paper, and shit like that, because, because look at Devin, like, he doesn't knock anybody out, and stuff like that, but, but he knocked out Moran, and that was one of, of Moran's only knockout losses. I'm pretty sure he had, like, one more or something, but I know Devin, like, one, like, he doesn't have a lot of them on there, and stuff like that, because I did Andy Cruz stop him? Actually, no, I think Andy Cruz stopped him, actually. Never mind, and stuff like that, but I mean, still, so I mean, Devin did do that, against Moran, but I mean, that was how many years ago? But I'm just saying. But let's talk about Brian Norman a little bit more, and stuff like that, because, been kind of talking about, Devin Haney for a little bit. So now I'm going to be talking about Brian Norman, and stuff like that, But Brian Norman, like, I mean, I've also talked about him also a little bit too, but that knockout against Jin Sasaki, that was a really good knockout, and stuff like that, like, that was a very, very impressive knockout. Trying to look for some. Excuse me. Trying to look for something. But, that knockout was vicious, man. But yeah, man, that knockout against Jin Sasaki, that was a crazy ass knockout, man. Like, I'm just saying though, like, that was a really, really crazy knockout, and stuff like that, because it's like, either way, like, I mean, I had Brian Norman winning that fight, but I mean, you know, if you guys seen that video and shit like that, I was still wanting to, like, I was still wanting, like, unanswered questions, like, you know, what can he do, like, under pressure against somebody that has serious power that's just gonna throw bombs against him, you know, and stuff like that, you know. And he clearly answered those questions. And fighting and going against somebody like Jin Sasaki is definitely something that's gonna definitely show me, you know, because, you know, Jin Sasaki, you know, it's like, you know, he's pretty good, you know, and shit like that, you know, and especially up in Japan, he's pretty damn good, you know, and stuff like that. But he went up there, you know, and stuff like that, battled all the odds, you know, and he won that fight, you know, and he didn't just win that fight, he won that shit impressively and knocked out Jin Sasaki, you know, and stuff like that, you know. But, you know, that's the thing, man, you know, and stuff like that, you know. It's just, you know, like Norman is a serious dude, and it's just more of like, you know, I wasn't really like too familiar with this dude until, you know, he went. I wasn't familiar with Norman at all until he fought into Giovanni Santillan, you know, and stuff like that. Which Giovanni Santillan, I wasn't really high on Santillan, but I wasn't promoting that fight at all, you know, because I didn't really think anything otherwise that the fight was gonna be anything really to promote like that, you know, because I really didn't know anything of Brian Norman, you know, and stuff like that, you know. But then once I seen him, you know, beat up, like, put the Beats by Dre on Santillan, that's what got my attention on that dude, you know, and shit like that, you know. So I mean, he is a very, very good fighter, Brian Norman, you know. And, you know, he got power in both hands, you know, and stuff like that. And he knows how to set up that power in so many different types of ways and stuff like that. And boy, oh boy, that would give Devin Haney some problems, you know, and stuff like that. You know, that would give Devin a lot of problems, you know, and shit like that, you know. And, you know, even possibly even have him win the fight, you know, and shit like that, you know. And that's the thing, you know, and shit like that, you know. But that's the thing, you know. But it just, overall, stylistically, this is a good fight, you know, and stuff like that. Because, I mean, the only type of time that really, like, a fight will be a good fight with Devin Haney is if Devin Haney is fighting a power puncher. If he ain't fighting a power puncher, it isn't really going to be entertaining, you know, and shit like that, you know. And because overall, like, you know, watching him fight isn't really that entertaining at all, you know, and shit like that, you know. But at the same time, though, you know, that's the only way that would be kind of entertaining, you know, and stuff like that, you know. But yeah, though, man, and that's the thing, you know. And for real, and I know this fight's gonna be scheduled for, if like when it's gonna be scheduled, the fight's gonna be scheduled in November. You know, I don't know when in November that is going to be scheduled, but I know that it's going to be scheduled in November because that's what, you know, the internet said, you know, and stuff like that, you know. But yeah. So basically, I looked it up, and Top Rank Bob Arum is going to be the one that would be promoting this fight. I mean, honestly, I hope that Bob Arum is going to be the one that's going to be promoting this fight. But the one thing I'm really hoping that's not going to happen is that this fight's going to be pay-per-view, you know, and stuff like that. Because I don't care about anything. Nobody should be having to pay for a Devin Haney fight. Like, literally. Like, I am just saying, you know, and shit like that, you know. And especially overall for this fight. No disrespect to Brian Norman. But Brian Norman, like, you know, he, like, it's not his time yet to get a pay-per-view, you know, and shit like that, you know. So it's like, this fight shouldn't be pay-per-view at all, you know, and stuff like that, you know. It should be a free fight, you know, and stuff like that, where everybody could watch it, you know, and stuff like that, you know. And that's the thing, because overall, I feel like that, you know, that, like, you know, I don't know, though, because even when people, like, even pay-per-view fights, like, they still get a lot of people watching fights, off of streams, off of paying for it, and shit like that, everywhere. Cause not everybody pays for those fights, and shit like that, and that's the thing and shit like that, but either way and shit like that, you still get a lot of viewers with that, regardless. But either way, this fight should be free, where you don't have to deal with any of anything of paying or having to do anything special. Like, this fight should be free, and shit like that, and that's the thing, and shit like that, and of course, if you don't have ESPN Plus, then I mean obviously you have to pay for that, and stuff like that, but if you have cable already or whatever, then I mean you could just watch this for free, and stuff like that, because I'm pretty sure this fight would be on regular cable, and stuff like that, depending on probably, the service of what people have, and stuff like that, but oh shit. But yeah, though, overall, what I think of this fight, it's a good fight, but at the end of the day, it's another Devin Haney fight, and that is the thing, stuff like that. It is nothing more than just another Devin Haney fight, and stuff like that. It's just that's what that's what I'm just on. And that's the thing, and stuff like that, and again, unless if Devin can prove something different in this fight, cause what if he does prove something different in this fight, and stuff like that? Like, what if he actually shows urgency and actually, wants to win this fight? And well, I mean, every fight he wants to win, but actually wanting to squabble and actually wanting to take chances, and stuff like that, proper chances. Because, again, just like I said way back in this video, Devin, he fights scared, and shit like that, and he doesn't like to go into, and whenever he gets into the inside and likes to take chances, like, he doesn't really fight very smart, and stuff like that, and he honestly fights, like, where, he's open and stuff like that, and he honestly, like, when he wants to fight in the inside, like, he makes it very textbook, like he's about to go into the inside, like he only can do good with just basically running, and shit like that, and that's the thing with Devin Haney, and shit like that. But if he could prove with actually like pressing the action, fighting, and shit like that, not just running away, boo, 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 boo. I mean, even though that's a good tactic, I mean, that will win you fights. I mean, either way, a win is a win, and a win is a win. But, I mean, it's just, you can look a lot more impressive, and shit like that. Like, even if he looks like what he, like against, like, what he did against Regis Prograis. I don't know if I said that, before, but even if he fought, even if he fights, Brian Norman, like how he fought Regis Prograis, if that's the thing and shit like that, it's like you never know, stuff like that. It's like you never know. And also at the same time, it's like, Regis and Brian Norman are almost around the same size, and stuff like that, I mean, Norman's a little bit more like, more, like lean, more shredded, like, more muscly, but I mean, they're both 140, and stuff like that, and they both are, but I think Brian Norman's a little bit shorter, though, if I'm not, that's a cough, but I think Brian Norman's a little bit shorter than Regis Prograis, and stuff like that, like, Regis Prograis is more, is more taller, because I think Brian Norman is like 5'6", I believe, and then Regis Prograis, he's 5'8", and stuff like that, and that's the thing and shit like that, so, but either way, they're both similar in height, but but Brian Norman is the smaller fighter. But either way, this is like another Regis Pro Grace, I mean, I don't know, but I mean, Regis is a good fighter, and overall, that's what I'm saying, you know, it could be like another Regis Pro Grace type of fight for Devin Haney. It could be, you never know, man. But it's just more of Brian Norman carries a lot more power than than Regis Pro Grace in one singular shot, and shit like that, and that's the thing and shit like that, and so that's something that's gonna be definitely very different in this fight because, Regis Pro Grace would have to be accumulated with his punches. So I mean, overall, that fight was a little bit more tailor made for for Devin Haney, and shit like that, But that's the thing. But overall and shit like that, just to end this video off and shit like that, who do I think would win this fight? Because I mean, my opinion can definitely change, and shit like that, But who do I think would win this fight? It just overall, it's just at the same time, it's hard for me to go against Devin Haney, and shit like that, and that's just my prediction for right now, and shit like that. It's not. It doesn't mean that's gonna be my prediction overall, but it's kind of hard for me to go against somebody like Devin Haney, and shit like that, and that's the thing. But this is me not really really running through their skill sets and stuff like that, and but overall, just from just my knowledge, and shit like that, it just at the same time it's hard for me to go against somebody like Devin Haney, against a fight like Brian Norman. Even though Norman is a tough fighter, and shit like that, but Devin Haney's definitely a very tough fight. A very 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 tough fight for him for a first really tough fight, in the high level, in the high level, there's different fights where he would win, and shit like that, I'm not gonna lie, there's fights where he will win, but it's just against somebody like Devin Haney who overall I just know he ain't gonna squabble against Brian Norman. Because, I mean, if he does, I would be shocked to see if he fucking won that exchange against Brian Norman, and shit like that, it's just, there's no way he would win those exchanges. That's what Brian Norman is that's it, that's what he does, and shit like that, is fight, not just run, and shit like that, But Devin Haney, he's gonna just run all night, and he's naturally more of the bigger fighter, and shit like that, or I don't know if he's naturally bigger or not, I don't know, but I know he's more taller and, and stuff like that, but I will say that he is definitely a lot more skinnier than Brian Norman, and shit like that, he's definitely a lot more nimble, so the impact of Brian Norman's shots is going to be very effective, and shit like that, but, Devin Haney, he's just gonna run all day, and shit like that, but you never know, man. But that's just for what it is right now, is that I would probably say that Devin Haney would just win off of, I would say, probably I would say between a unanimous and a majority decision, and shit like that, it could be whatever decision. If I'm gonna pick one, I'm probably gonna say a unanimous, and stuff like that, but again, this is only for now, and shit like that, predictions definitely will change, and shit like that, and that's the thing, and shit like that, but thank you all for watching this video. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. I'm Preston. Peace out.